Morning. Still, just think, yeah, it is. So today we're off to the dentist later. All of us, new dentist. The one we used to have was in town, and many years ago, my husband's back got broken, and all the dentists in town seemed to be up lots of stairs, and it was getting a bit difficult. And then the dentist that my daughter used to see had to go back to India, so it seemed like a good time to change. So we're going to a new dentist. And that's all fun, except that all of us have got colds and things, except my daughter, who's perfectly well. I'm quite excited about going to the dentist, which is great because the first dentist that we went to with her wasn't very good with her at all. Actually, he wasn't very good with any of us. We changed pretty quickly. And the last thing I wanted to do was start a phobia when she was quite young because dental phobia is quite a common one. Quite a lot of people are scared of dentists. And the interesting thing about a phobia is it's not rational. There is nothing about a phobia that is rational. You can't reason and logic your way out of it. It is a very primitive protection response by your brain, your subconscious, because your subconscious perceives something as a threat and it takes you into a fight, flight, freeze response. Say that slowly so I don't swear. And that response is panic, anxiety, get the hell out of here, can't move, whatever it is. Quite often people have phobias to dentists. Sometimes, quite commonly, the phobia comes from somewhere, but very rarely does it come from an experience with a dentist. It can often come from some other association, and it ties into the caveman stuff, the three rules of react first, think later. The connection to love doesn't tend to be about the one fitting in, but yeah, it's really quite common to have clients and to talk to people who have real phobias over dentists. And there are things you can do about a phobia. There are things you can do to cope. Breathing, for example. There's a technique called 7-11 breathing, where you breathe in for the count of 7 and out for the count of 11. And the thing about that is when you're panicking, when you're in a state of fear, your breath gets shortened because your brain gets you ready to run away or to fight. And if you change your breathing pattern so that it isn't that kind of short, panicky breathing, then it sends a message back to your head to say, actually, I'm not panicking, and you calm down. It's kind of a weird physiological mind-body connection thing. And because the body says I'm not panicking, the brain thinks it's not panicking, and you kind of can calm down. Doesn't necessarily help the next time you go to the dentist because your brain still thinks there's a risk there, and as long as it thinks there's a risk, it's going to try and keep you safe, and it's going to try and keep you away from that situation. So phobias are pretty easy to change. I put easy in quotes. But on the scale of things to change, it usually can be dealt with within one session, unless it's very deep rooted. I can deal with phobias on Skype, FaceTime, face to face, whatever it is, it doesn't matter. Because it's a miscalculation. It's a miscalculation because your brain says you are about to go into battle with the saber-toothed tiger, and you're not. No matter what it is, no matter how you rationalise it, it is not the same as going into battle with a saber-toothed tiger. So we can persuade your head that that's not true, and it doesn't need to take you into that protection state. And if it's not triggering that protection state, then you don't have those feelings of anxiety and panic, and therefore you don't have to cope with them. And that kind of sums up the way I approach my therapy anyway. There is lots of therapy out there that allows you to cope with what's going on. Cognitive behavioral therapy is all about rationalizing your way through changing your behaviors using cognitive processes. I don't believe when a behavior gets in the way, it's a cognitive thing. I believe it's out of your cognitive control. I believe it sits in your subconscious. And if you want to change it, you need to change your subconscious. But if you change your subconscious, then you don't have the trigger, which means you can go into those situations and you don't have the fear, so you don't have to cope. You just can keep the ability to think. It's freedom to think that I work on. The interesting thing about phobia, the most difficult thing about working with people with phobias is not actually getting them past the phobia. The most difficult thing in working with people with phobias is actually getting them to believe that they no longer are phobic. Because all they've ever known and all their head has ever known is when this happens, I react this way. So the only way to really believe that you're over a phobia is to experience it. So if somebody had a dental phobia, I wouldn't see them unless they were about to go to the dentist. If somebody had a fear of flying, I wouldn't see them unless they had a flight coming soon. It's a little bit harder with things like fear of puking, the emetophobia, I think it's called. Some phobias are a bit harder to test, but the general principle is that unless your brain has evidence that something has changed, it will not believe something's changed. It will think it's always been the way of it. Any client who sees me about anything is tasked with noticing the changes, and this is no different. So, phobias are not rational, they are not your fault, but they can be changed and they